the world was dying. Cities once full of life now lay in ruins, their glass towers shattered, streets empty, and the air heavy with smoke and ash.
Humanity had pushed itself to the edge, ignoring warnings for centuries.
Climate disasters had torn apart coastlines. Floods swallowed entire towns, while heat waves turned fertile lands into deserts. Crops failed, rivers dried, and famine spread like wildfire. To make matters worse, experiments with artificial intelligence had gone out of control. Machines designed to help humanity had malfunctioned, taking over energy grids and transportation systems, leaving humans in chaos. In the midst of this destruction, a small group of survivors gathered in what remained of a high-tech observatory on a mountaintop. They were the last hope of a species that had once believed itself unstoppable. Among them was Dr. Mara Lynn, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and an unyielding spirit. Her hair, streaked with silver, framed a face lined with both worry and determination. She had spent years studying the stars, hoping that beyond them lay answers to humanity's problems. The observatory's main chamber hummed with energy as computers worked tirelessly. Screens displayed readings from every corner of Earth, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains. Amid the blinking lights and constant data streams, a single thought consumed Mara: survival. Humanity had to reach out. Humanity had to call for help. With trembling hands, she initiated the signal. It was simple yet powerful. A message broadcast across the cosmos, carried on frequencies that might one day reach another civilization. We are human. We are in danger. We need help, the message said over and over, encoded in a language of mathematics and logic that any intelligent species could understand. Her colleagues, a mix of scientists, engineers, and a few brave explorers, watched with a mix of hope and skepticism. Many had given up on salvation from the stars long ago, believing humanity was alone in the universe. But Mara refused to surrender to despair. Even if no one answers, she said softly, we must try. We cannot let fear control us now. As the signal left Earth, a strange calm fell over the observatory. Outside, the winds had stopped for the first time in days, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The survivors stared at the night sky, searching for any sign that their call had been heard. Stars glittered like diamonds, distant and indifferent. For a moment, it seemed as though nothing would ever change. Then something unusual happened. In the forests below the observatory, deep within the untouched wilderness, the air began to shimmer. Trees bent and swayed, though there was no wind. Shadows moved unnaturally fast. Eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, appeared among the underbrush. At first, the humans thought it was a trick of the light, or their exhausted minds playing games. But Mara knew better. These are not ordinary animals, she whispered. Her heart pounded. They're responding to us. From the shadows emerged creatures unlike any humans had seen before. Wolves larger than horses moved with precision and grace. Their fur shimmered in the moonlight, and their eyes held an intelligence that was almost human. Giant owls glided silently overhead, their wings spanning more than 10 feet, and reptiles with thick, glimmering scales slithered through the undergrowth, moving as if in perfect coordination. The survivors froze, fear gripping their hearts. Many of them had believed that Earth's apex predators were long gone, wiped out by human expansion and hunting, but now standing before them were beings that seemed to embody the wild power of the planet itself. They're listening, said one of Mara's colleagues, a young engineer named Thomas. His voice trembled. We called to the stars, and Earth answered. Mara felt a mix of awe and fear. She had always loved animals, but these were different. There was a consciousness in their movements, a sense of purpose. They were not here to attack, not yet. Instead, they watched, their eyes reflecting the glow of the observatory lights as if trying to understand the humans' intentions. Over the next few hours, the survivors observed the creatures. Whenever a human stepped forward calmly, the monsters would pause, tilting their heads in curiosity. Whenever someone acted out of fear or aggression, they would growl, showing that they understood danger and mistrust. It was as if the animals had become sentient, responding not just to stimuli but to emotion and thought. Mara began recording everything. She knew that this moment was history. Humanity had reached out to the stars for help, but the universe had answered in the most unexpected way. The monsters of Earth, awakened by humanity's cry, had returned not as enemies but as something more. Guardians, perhaps, or challengers. Only time would tell. As night turned into dawn, Mara and her team made a bold decision. They would attempt to communicate with the creatures to understand their motives. Using gestures, soft tones, and simple tools, they began experimenting. A stick held out peacefully would be sniffed and examined. A calm voice would lower tension. Slowly, the creatures began to respond, mirroring actions and showing signs of recognition. The observatory became a hub of both fear and fascination. News of the creatures spread through the remaining human settlements via emergency broadcasts and radio messages. Some humans panicked, calling the monsters a threat. Others were hopeful, seeing a chance to rebuild a world where humans were no longer alone. Mara knew that this was only the beginning. The monsters' appearance was a turning point, a bridge between what humanity had lost and what it might regain. If humans could learn to live with these beings, perhaps they could survive the disasters that had already ravaged their world. If they failed, well, the consequences were unimaginable. By the end of the first week, Mara had made progress. She discovered that the creatures seemed to respond best to calm determination, to humans acting with respect for life and Earth. Those who tried to dominate or harm them were met with subtle but unmistakable resistance. It was clear that these beings were not allies in the traditional sense, they were judges, observers and protectors testing humanity's readiness to coexist. One evening, Mara climbed to the top of the observatory, looking out over the forest below. The moonlight shimmered on the eyes of the monsters moving silently among the trees. She felt a strange connection, as if the planet itself was alive and aware. "We are not alone," she whispered to the night sky. "And maybe we are not meant to be." For the first time in years, hope stirred in her heart. Humanity had called for help, not knowing where it would come from. The answer had arrived not from distant stars but from the deep, wild heart of Earth itself. Mara knew that the coming days would challenge everything humans thought they knew about life, intelligence, and survival. But she also knew that this was a chance, a rare chance to prove that humans could rise, not just above the stars but with the world that had always been their home. The creatures waited, patient and silent, their glowing eyes watching every human movement. Mara and her team knew that trust would be the key. If humans could prove their worth, Earth itself might save them. If not, the monsters were powerful enough to reclaim the world entirely. And so, under the first light of dawn, humanity's next chapter began. It was not a chapter of conquest or surrender. It was a chapter of understanding, of learning to listen to a world that had survived for millions of years, and of discovering that sometimes when humans cry out for help, the most extraordinary answers come from the most unexpected places. Mara looked to the sky one last time before heading down into the forest with her team. The stars glittered far above, distant and silent. But Earth was alive and its monsters had heard their call. The real journey was about to begin. The sun had barely risen when Mara and her small team ventured into the forest. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Morning mist curled around the massive tree trunks, and the silence was both beautiful and intimidating. The monsters of Earth were out there somewhere, and Mara knew that approaching them required more than courage. It required patience and respect. She led the way carefully, each step measured. Behind her, Tomas and the other scientists followed, carrying devices to monitor the creatures' movements. The larger wolves prowled silently ahead, their fur glinting in the early light, and giant owls perched high in the branches, watching intently. It was as if the forest itself had woken up, alive with creatures that had once only been legends. "Do you think they will let us get close?" Tomas asked in a whisper, his eyes scanning the treetops nervously. Mara shook her head slightly. "I don't know, but they are not here to attack. They're watching us, waiting to see who we are." As they moved deeper, the creatures began to reveal themselves. Wolves stepped onto clearings, their movements deliberate and calm. They sniffed the air, tilted their heads, and seemed to study the humans carefully. Some even circled gently, keeping a respectful distance. The owls hooted softly, and their wings created a rustling sound like leaves in the wind. Lizards with shimmering scales slid over mossy rocks, leaving trails of faint light in their wake. For hours, Mara and her team observed without interference. They noted patterns in the monsters' behavior, how the wolves moved in pairs or small groups, how the owls kept watch over the smaller creatures, and how the lizards sometimes approached cautiously, only to retreat when humans moved too quickly. "It's incredible," said Dr. Anwar, a botanist. They're not acting like animals. They have structure, strategy, intelligence. It's like they're organized. Yes, Mara said, nodding slowly. And it's not random. They are responding to us, but also to the way we feel. Calmness, patience, respect, that seems to matter to them. The team decided to test this theory. Mara crouched down, arms extended in a gesture of peace. A large wolf stepped forward, its massive paws making no sound on the soft forest floor. It sniffed the air and then hesitantly the back of Mara's hand. Her heart raced, but she remained still. The wolf's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly the wolf stepped back, letting her stand. Another followed, circling at a distance. The creatures were cautious, yet they did not flee or attack. They were intelligent observers measuring the human's intent. "It knows we're not a threat," Tomas whispered. "It trusts us at least a little." Mara smiled faintly. "Trust is earned, Thomas, and we have a lot to prove." Over the next few days, the survivors built a small camp near the forest's edge. They maintained a careful routine, moving slowly, speaking softly, leaving food at a distance as a gesture of goodwill. The monsters responded, often leaving gifts in return. Small, colorful fruits, fish from nearby streams, or even rare minerals that shimmered in the sunlight. Mara realized that the creatures were communicating in their own way, creating a bridge between species. One evening, a massive storm swept over the forest. Thunder rolled like drums and lightning split the sky. Trees bent under the wind and the humans huddled in their tents. The monsters, however, did not retreat. The wolves stood firmly, shielding smaller animals, while the owls circled above, keeping watch. Even the lizards seemed to find safe perches on high rocks. Mara watched in awe. They protect each other and the forest. They are not just responding to us. They are guardians. The storm passed by morning, leaving the forest sparkling with raindrops. Birds sang once more, and a rainbow stretched across the horizon. It was a reminder that life, even after devastation, could find a way to thrive. However, not all humans reacted positively to the creatures. Some survivors from nearby settlements arrived, drawn by stories of giant wolves and glowing lizards. Fearful and distrustful, they carried weapons ready to hunt or capture. Mara tried to explain, but words were often drowned in panic. One man raised a rifle, aiming at a young wolf that had approached the camp curiously. The wolf froze, ears back, ready to flee. Mara ran forward, shouting, "No, stop." The man hesitated, but the others backed him, arguing that the monsters were dangerous. Mara took a deep breath, holding up her hands. "They are not our enemies. They are Earth's guardians. If we harm them, we harm ourselves. Trust me." The young wolf, sensing Mara's intent, relaxed slightly. Its eyes seemed to plead with the humans to understand. After tense moments, the intruders lowered their weapons, though suspicion remained. Mara realized that this was just the beginning of a larger challenge, teaching humans to coexist with beings that were far beyond their comprehension. As weeks passed, Mara's team learned more about the monsters' abilities. The wolves could sense approaching danger from miles away. The owls had an uncanny ability to navigate even in total darkness, while the lizards could detect subtle changes in the environment, alerting the group to storms or unstable ground. It was clear that these creatures had evolved not only for survival but for observation, protection, and intelligence. One morning, a new phenomenon appeared. The wolves howled in unison, a sound that resonated across the forest and seemed to vibrate in the humans' chests. The owls joined with low hoots, and the lizards flicked their tails rhythmically. Mara realized that they were communicating with each other, and perhaps even with her team. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The forest was alive not just with creatures but with a shared consciousness, a network of life that connected everything. Mara decided to take a bold step. She and Thomas set out to leave the camp for a deeper part of the forest, hoping to learn more about the monster's origin. As they moved, a wolf appeared in front of them. It didn't growl. It didn't attack. It simply watched, waiting for Mara to decide her next move. "We have to show them respect," Mara whispered. "We cannot force anything. We can only ask." Slowly, she extended her hand. The wolf sniffed it again, then circled her slowly. Mara stayed calm, feeling the rhythm of its movements, the intelligence in its gaze. Finally, the wolf stepped aside, allowing them to pass. It was a simple gesture, but it meant something profound. The forest was acknowledging them, testing them, and perhaps offering an invitation. In the heart of the forest, Mara and Thomas found signs of the creatures' hidden lives. Massive nests built high in the trees. Intricate tunnels dug into the earth and patterns etched into rock suggested planning and purpose. The monsters were not only alive, they were thriving, organizing, and maintaining balance in a world humans had nearly destroyed. Mara realized something important. Humanity had called out to the stars for help, imagining distant civilizations would come to save them. But help had arrived in the most unexpected form, Earth itself through its most ancient and powerful creatures. The monsters were not mindless predators. They were the planet's way of protecting itself, of responding to a species that had nearly caused its own extinction. As night fell, Mara sat beside a glowing lizard, watching as it flicked its tail in what she could only describe as a pattern, almost like a language. The wolves lay in a protective circle nearby, and the owls watched silently from above. For the first time, Mara felt a fragile sense of hope. Perhaps humanity could survive, not because the stars would answer their cries, but because Earth was alive, watching and willing to test their worth. Survival would not be given, it would be earned. And Mara knew that humans had one chance to prove that they could live with respect, courage, and intelligence. The forest was quiet now, but not empty. Every rustle of leaves, every flicker of light, every soft growl or hoot was a reminder that life endured, even in the most desperate times. The monsters of Earth had awakened, and the real challenge for humanity was only beginning. Mara looked up at the stars once more. They seemed distant, indifferent, and beautiful. But the true answer, she realized, was here on Earth, in the creatures that had returned from legend, in the wild and untamed forests that had survived humanity's mistakes, and in the fragile hope that humans could rise to meet them. The awakening had begun. Days turned into weeks, and the forest became both a sanctuary and a classroom for the survivors. Mara and her team learned to move with care, observe without fear, and communicate without words. Each step was a lesson in patience. The monsters of Earth, once feared legends, had become guides, teachers, and allies, but only for those willing to respect the delicate balance of life around them. It was Thomas who first suggested a simple idea. We need a system, a way to work with them, not just observe. They respond to intent and emotion, yes, but we have to show that we are partners, not intruders. Mara nodded thoughtfully. We cannot force them to trust us, but we can earn it. We can demonstrate our intent through actions, not just words. They began small. Food was left near the edges of the camp, not in the center. Tools were set aside when walking near nests. When entering a clearing, they moved slowly, bowing their heads in a gesture of respect. The monsters responded. Wolves would approach to guide them along paths hidden beneath dense vegetation. Owls would lead them to safe vantage points. Lizards would slither ahead, sensing dangers humans could not detect. The first true breakthrough came when a young girl from a nearby survivor settlement joined Mara's group. Her name was Lyra, barely 12 years old, with curious eyes and a fearless heart. Unlike the adults who hesitated or acted out of fear, Lyra approached the creatures with wonder rather than suspicion. The largest wolf, a silver giant Mara had named Ashen, stepped forward as she extended a hand. Lyra's calm touch and soft words seemed to bridge the gap between species. Ashen lowered its massive head, pressing it gently against her palm. From that moment, a bond was formed, visible to all. Look, Thomas whispered. They recognize her differently. There's trust there. That's what we need to show. Calm, respect, understanding. The humans started learning the monsters' patterns. Wolves marked safe paths through the forest, leading to hidden water sources and food caches. Owls kept watch from above, alerting humans to approaching dangers, be it falling trees, predators, or unstable terrain. Lizards scouted ahead, sensing changes in temperature, wind, and humidity. Slowly, the team realized that these creatures were more than allies. They were the planet's natural defense, a system of guardians that had waited for humanity to prove it could coexist. But cooperation was not universal. Some survivors from distant settlements viewed the monsters as threats to be tamed or killed. They believed that capturing or controlling the creatures could give them power in a dying world. Mara tried to reason with them, explaining that force would only bring danger. One morning, a group of these outsiders approached the camp, armed with crude weapons. Their leader, a man named Corin, shouted, "Step aside! These beasts will be ours. Whoever controls them controls the world." The monsters did not attack immediately. The wolves formed a circle around Mara's group, growling low and warning the intruders. Owls circled above and lizards flicked their tails in warning signals. Every creature in the forest seemed to respond to the threat instinctively, coordinating as if part of a single mind. Corin stepped forward, swinging a makeshift spear. "We will not be stopped," he yelled. Mara stepped between him and the wolves, arms raised. "Stop, you don't understand. If you hurt them, you hurt us all. They are protectors, not enemies." For a tense moment, the forest was silent except for the growls of the wolves and the hiss of the lizards. Then Ashen, the silver wolf, stepped forward. Its massive body radiated strength and its eyes locked with Corin's. The man froze as if the wolf's gaze had pierced through him. Slowly he lowered his weapon, unsure, afraid. Mara seized the moment. "You see? They respond to intent. If you come with respect, they will guide you. If you come with violence, they will defend themselves. Choose wisely." Reluctantly, Corin and his group left, grumbling but unharmed. The humans who had doubted Mara's methods watched in silence, realizing that brute force alone could not conquer these creatures. Cooperation was the key. With trust growing, the team ventured further into the forest. The monsters guided them to hidden areas untouched by human destruction. Waterfalls cascaded into crystal-clear pools. Fruits and herbs, rare and nutritious, grew in abundance. Ancient trees stood taller than any skyscraper, their branches forming natural shelters. Mara understood that the forest held secrets humans had long forgotten, secrets that could restore life to a world that had nearly perished. The most remarkable discovery came when the team reached a hidden valley. The ground glimmered with crystals and plants grew in patterns that seemed almost mathematical. Here the creatures were more numerous, their behaviors more organized. Wolves patrolled in pairs, owls perched in strategic locations, and lizards darted across rocks in synchronized movements. Mara realized this was a center of intelligence, a hub for Earth's guardians. "This is incredible," she whispered. "They've been protecting this place for centuries, maybe millennia, and they've waited for humanity to reach a point where cooperation is possible." Lyra knelt by a stream, watching a group of lizards drink and flick their tails. "They're teaching us," she said softly. "We just have to listen," and listen they did. Over time, Mara's team began to mimic the creatures' movements and behaviors. They walked quietly, observed patterns, and communicated with gestures. Slowly, the barriers between species began to dissolve. The forest felt alive not just with creatures but with understanding, a network of intelligence that humans had once thought only existed among themselves. The first major test of the alliance came unexpectedly. A landslide, triggered by a distant earthquake, blocked a valley path and threatened a small human settlement downstream. Without the forest's intervention, the destruction would have been catastrophic. Mara and her team raced to the site, guided by the wolves. Owls circled above, providing aerial reconnaissance while lizards scouted the unstable ground. Working together, humans and monsters created a series of barriers and channels to redirect the mud and debris. Wolves carried heavy rocks with surprising strength. Lizards found natural drainage paths. Humans coordinated efforts, building makeshift supports. By nightfall, the danger had passed. The settlement was safe, and the survivors cheered, amazed at the cooperation they had witnessed. Mara knew this was more than survival. It was proof that humans and monsters could thrive together when working as one. News of the alliance spread. Small groups of humans began approaching the forest with cautious optimism, hoping to learn from the creatures rather than fear them. Mara's team became teachers, guiding these newcomers and showing them the ways of trust, patience, and respect. Yet Mara knew the alliance was fragile. The monsters were powerful, but they were not invincible. Humans had the ability to either nurture this bond or destroy it with fear and aggression. Every choice mattered. One quiet evening, as the team sat around a campfire, Ashen rested nearby, its massive head on Mara's lap. Lyra, yawning, leaned against Thomas. The owls hooted softly in the trees and the lizards glimmered in the firelight. The forest seemed at peace. Mara looked up at the stars. They still glittered, distant and cold, indifferent to humanity's plight. But Earth had answered in a way no one had expected. Its monsters had risen not to punish but to test. And humanity, for the first time in centuries, was beginning to meet that test. "This is just the beginning," Mara whispered. "We've learned to walk with them, but the world outside is still dangerous. Other humans may not understand, and there may be challenges we cannot see yet. But for now, we have an alliance, and that is everything. The monsters stirred as if acknowledging her words. Wolves padded softly around the camp. Owls adjusted their watchful perches, and lizards flicked their tails rhythmically. Mara felt a deep connection, a realization that humans were no longer alone and perhaps had never truly been alone. The planet itself, through its guardians, had reached out. And so humanity's survival was no longer a solitary struggle. It had a partner in Earth's monsters, a guide to navigate the dangers of a collapsing world. Together they would face whatever came next, proving that cooperation, respect, and courage could bridge even the greatest divides. The alliance had been formed, and it was stronger than anyone could have imagined. For months, the alliance between humans and Earth's monsters had grown stronger. Wolves guided humans through dense forests and treacherous mountains. Owls scouted the skies, alerting teams to danger long before it arrived. Lizards moved silently across the terrain, sensing tremors and changes in the environment. Mara and her team had built a system of trust, teaching newcomers how to coexist with these powerful guardians. It felt as though humanity had finally found a place in the world again, a chance to survive after centuries of mistakes. But peace is often a fragile thing. One clear night, while Mara was observing the stars, a strange light appeared in the sky. It was unlike any aircraft or natural phenomenon she had ever seen. Bright, precise, and moving with purpose, it approached Earth rapidly. The signal humans had sent long ago, the one broadcast into the cosmos, was being answered. At first, hope stirred. Perhaps another civilization had heard their call and was coming to help. But Mara's instincts, honed by months of observing Earth's creatures, told her to be cautious. There was something cold and calculating about the light, something that did not belong to nature. As the morning sun rose, the shape of the intruders became clear. Massive ships hovered above the forests, their surfaces metallic and flawless, reflecting the sunlight in sharp lines. They were silent, but the humans could feel the intensity of their presence. Birds and smaller animals scattered in panic, and even the monsters of Earth tensed, gathering in strategic positions around the camp. Mara called the team together. "This is not a friendly visit," she said. "Whatever these beings are, they are here for observation. Or worse." The creatures themselves seemed to understand immediately. Wolves circled the humans, ears alert. Owls perched high in the treetops, scanning the skies. Lizards flicked their tails, signaling danger. The forest had become a living fortress, every guardian ready to defend its inhabitants. Thomas approached Mara, voice trembling slightly. "What are they? Aliens? Machines?" "I don't know," Mara admitted. "But we cannot wait for them to decide what we are. We have to act." The first encounter was subtle. A small probe descended near the edge of the forest, scanning the terrain and humans with strange sensors. Mara observed it from behind a tree. The wolf stepped forward as if challenging it, growling low and circling around. The probe reacted, sending out a pulse of light. But the wolves remained firm, standing their ground without attacking. Mara realized that the monsters were not only intelligent, but also protective in ways humans had never imagined. They did not attack recklessly. They analyzed, they tested, and they defended strategically. This was Earth's response to a threat, guided by instinct and intelligence combined. Over the next few days, the humans and monsters worked together to prepare. Humans built simple structures for observation and communication, while wolves, owls, and lizards patrolled perimeters. The creatures coordinated seamlessly, demonstrating tactics that humans had never conceived. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting ambush points along likely paths of intrusion and marking safe zones for humans to retreat if needed. Mara realized that humanity's ingenuity, combined with the monsters' natural abilities, made a powerful combination. Humans could design and construct, while the creatures could sense, hunt, and strategize in ways technology alone could never achieve. It was a partnership born of necessity, but it was also a lesson in humility. Humans were no longer the rulers of the planet. They were learners, allies, and stewards alongside Earth's guardians. The aliens, as Mara now called them, began to test the humans more directly. Drones scanned the forest and fired non-lethal pulses, forcing humans to move quickly and find cover. Each time, the monsters responded instantly. Wolves blocked paths, owls warned of incoming drones, and lizards created diversions. It was as if the creatures could anticipate the intruders' moves before they happened. using the humans' efforts in combination with their own abilities to counter threats. Mara watched in awe. "They're teaching us," she whispered. "They're not just defending. They're showing us how to survive, how to think like them." But the aliens were relentless. Larger ships descended and their probes became more aggressive, scanning deeper into human settlements. Some survivors panicked, fleeing into the mountains or attempting to hide in caves. Mara's team worked tirelessly, guiding them back, organizing defense lines, and coordinating with the monsters. It was exhausting work, but essential. Survival depended on unity, strategy, and trust. One night, a direct confrontation occurred. A massive alien drone descended near the camp, its lights bright and cold. Wolves formed a defensive circle around the humans, growling and showing their teeth. Owls dove silently from above, forcing the drone to change course. Lizards ran in synchronized patterns, creating confusing trails and reflections that disrupted the drone's sensors. Mara led the humans forward, using improvised barriers and mirrors to redirect the drone's attention. The creatures worked in perfect coordination with her, responding instantly to her commands without needing words. The drone, unable to adapt to this combined strategy, finally retreated, buzzing away into the night sky. "That was incredible," Tomas said, breathing heavily. "I've never seen anything like it. They're not just defending. They're teaching us to fight back intelligently." Mara nodded, pride and determination in her eyes. "This is the first real test, and we passed. But the aliens will return stronger and smarter. We must be ready." Over the next weeks, Mara's team worked tirelessly to strengthen the alliance. Humans built observation towers, traps, and shelters while the monsters continued to patrol, scout, and protect. Wolves mapped paths through the forest and mountains. Owls provided reconnaissance and early warnings. Lizards monitored environmental changes, alerting the group to possible natural hazards. Even smaller creatures seemed to join the effort. Birds and small mammals followed the humans and monsters, acting as scouts or messengers. It was as if the forest itself had united against a common threat, recognizing that survival depended on cooperation. Mara realized something profound. This alliance was more than survival. It was a partnership between species, a demonstration that intelligence, empathy, and courage could bridge even the widest divides. Humans were no longer alone in the universe or on their planet. They had allies in forms they had never imagined, and the lessons they learned from these allies could shape the future of their species. But Mara also knew that the external threat was only one part of the challenge. Humans themselves could be unpredictable. Fear, greed, or misunderstanding could unravel the fragile alliance. She had to teach not only strategy but also respect and empathy. The monsters had shown humans the way, but it was up to humanity to follow it faithfully. One evening, Mara stood atop a ridge, looking out over the forest. Wolves patrolled below, owls circled in the darkening sky, and lizards flicked their tails, signaling messages only Mara and her team could understand. The alien ships lingered above, their presence a constant reminder of the stakes. "They think they can control us," Mara said softly to Thomas, who stood beside her. "But Earth has other plans. And now, so do we," Tomas nodded. "We've learned to move with them, to think with them. Together we're stronger than we ever were alone." Mara smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the surge of hope. "We will survive. Not because someone from the stars will save us, but because we are learning to live with the world we nearly destroyed. These creatures, this forest, it's teaching us how to rise again." And so, as night fell and the stars twinkled above, humans and monsters alike prepared for the battles to come. The alien force was relentless, and the world outside their forest was still full of dangers. But within the heart of Earth, a new strength had emerged, an alliance built on respect, intelligence, and courage. Together, they were ready to face whatever the universe might send next. Mara turned to the creatures surrounding the camp. Wolves padded silently, eyes alert. Owls hooted softly from above, and lizards shimmered in the firelight. The forest was alive, aware, and united. Humanity had called out to the stars, but it was Earth itself, and its monsters that had answered the call. And Mara knew with certainty that this was only the beginning. The final battle had been unlike anything Mara and her team had ever faced. The alien ships hovered above the forest, their sleek metallic surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. Drones buzzed through the treetops, scanning relentlessly, while powerful beams of energy threatened to cut swaths through the dense woods. But humanity was no longer alone. The monsters of Earth, their ancient allies, moved with precision and unity, protecting humans with instincts honed over millennia. Mara stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart pounding. Wolves patrolled the perimeter, their massive bodies tense and ready. Owls circled high above, watching every movement. Lizards flicked their tails in complex patterns, signaling danger and strategy. Even smaller animals had joined the effort, flitting from tree to tree, guiding humans to safety and confusing the alien sensors. "This is it," Thomas said beside her, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We've trained for this. We know the terrain. We know them. We can win," Mara nodded. "Not alone, but together. Yes, together we can survive." The aliens advanced, their drones descending rapidly. A hum of energy filled the forest, making leaves vibrate and birds scatter. The wolves sprang into action, intercepting drones before they reached humans. Their sheer size and speed allowed them to disable or knock down multiple devices in seconds. The owls swooped in silently, disrupting aerial surveillance, while lizards darted between trees, tripping sensors and creating false signals. Humans worked in tandem with the creatures. Mara and Thomas directed survivors to construct simple barriers, mirrors, and decoys, using natural materials to confuse the aliens. Fire signals, smoke, and light reflections combined with the monsters' tactics to create chaos among the alien forces. Every human action amplified the monsters' effectiveness and vice versa. The aliens were precise, relentless, and intelligent, but they had underestimated Earth and its guardians. Wolves herded drones into traps humans had set. Owls blinded sensors with sudden dives, and lizards caused cascading disruptions that slowed the intruders' movements. Even the ground itself seemed to work with them. Roots, rocks, and uneven terrain became obstacles for the technologically advanced invaders. Mara felt a surge of pride and hope. Humanity, which had once cried helplessly to the stars, was now standing strong alongside creatures older, wiser, and more powerful than themselves. They were no longer victims. They were participants in a force greater than anything the aliens could have predicted. Suddenly, one of the alien ships unleashed a massive beam of energy, cutting through trees and earth. The humans ducked behind rocks and barriers, but the monsters acted without hesitation. Wolves leapt into the path, absorbing the blast in ways that left them scorched but unbroken. Owls diverted the energy slightly with sudden swoops, while lizards flicked minerals into the air, creating reflections that disrupted the beam. It was a dangerous, coordinated effort, and it worked. Mara knew the turning point had come. The aliens realized that brute force alone could not defeat this alliance. Every attack was countered with intelligence, instinct, and teamwork. Every move the aliens made revealed a flaw in their understanding. They had assumed humans were weak, incapable of strategy without machines. They had assumed Earth's creatures were mindless predators. They were wrong. Human ingenuity combined with the monster's natural abilities created something entirely new. Mara led a group of survivors through hidden paths the wolves had shown them, using signals from lizards to navigate safely. From a high ridge, she coordinated fire signals and mirror reflections to blind alien sensors and create the illusion of larger forces. The aliens faltered, confused by the unexpected tactics. And Mara's heart soared. As the battle raged, Mara noticed Ashen, the silver wolf who had first accepted Lyra's trust, moving with incredible precision. He guided smaller wolves in flanking maneuvers, forcing the aliens into tight spaces where humans could safely block or disable their drones. Owls dropped small stones and branches onto sensors. Lizards created slippery paths for the aliens' ground units, and even birds and insects worked instinctively to hinder the intruders. Then, Mara realized something extraordinary. The forest itself seemed to be alive in coordination. Trees bent subtly to block beams, roots shifted to create barriers, and streams reflected light to confuse sensors. The monsters were not fighting alone, they were working with the planet. Humanity had become part of that system, and together they were unstoppable. Hours passed. The aliens tried to regroup, but their technology could not adapt fast enough to the living, thinking forest and its allies. Finally, the invaders began to retreat. Ships lifted off, beams and drones withdrawing, leaving the forest scarred but standing. Humans and monsters alike stood silent for a moment, watching the intruders disappear into the sky. When the last ship vanished, a cheer rose from the humans. Wolves howled in response, Owls hooted softly, and lizards flicked their tails as if in celebration. Lyra ran into Ashen's embrace, laughing and crying at the same time. Mara felt a deep sense of relief wash over her. Humanity had survived, not because of machines, weapons, or distant stars, but because they had worked with Earth itself. The aftermath was quiet, but filled with hope. Humans began rebuilding settlements in harmony with the forest. Wolves guided construction, owls patrolled for safety, and lizards helped humans find edible plants and clean water. Mara's team became leaders, teaching newcomers how to live respectfully alongside Earth's guardians. For the first time in decades, the air smelled clean, and the forests seemed to breathe freely again. Rivers flowed with clear water, birds returned to the skies, and sunlight filtered through the treetops in golden beams. It was a new beginning, fragile but promising. Mara walked through the forest one morning, Ashen by her side and Lyra skipping ahead. The monsters moved naturally, comfortable and confident, yet always alert. Mara understood that the planet had accepted humans once again, not as rulers but as partners. Respect and cooperation had earned humanity a second chance. She paused at a clearing and looked up at the stars. They were still distant and indifferent, sparkling quietly in the sky. But Earth had answered humanity's call long before the stars ever could. Its monsters had risen not as enemies or conquerors, but as protectors and teachers. Humanity had cried out for help and learned that the greatest help comes from understanding, courage, and unity. Thomas joined her, looking at the forest with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "We've come so far," he said softly. "I never thought we could survive this, but we did. Together," Mara nodded. "We did more than survive. We've learned. We've grown, and we've remembered what it means to be human. Not just to fight, but to understand, to respect, and to cooperate. That is our true strength." As the months passed, humans and monsters developed a new society. Settlements were designed to work with the environment, not against it. Wolves patrolled boundaries, ensuring safety. Owls provided early warnings. Lizards guided humans to resources. Even the smallest creatures had roles in the ecosystem, and humans had learned to notice, respect, and work with them. Children played alongside wolves, learning instinctively how to read the forest. Scientists documented behaviors of monsters, discovering knowledge lost for centuries. Mara realized that humanity had not only survived, it had evolved in understanding, empathy, and cooperation. One evening, Mara sat by a river, watching the reflection of the moon in the water. Ashen rested at her feet, Lyra beside her. The forest was alive, calm, and vibrant. The aliens were gone, the immediate danger had passed, and humanity had proven its worth. "We called out to the stars," Mara whispered, "but the answer came from here, from Earth, from its creatures. We survived because we listened, because we learned, and because we worked together." Lyra smiled, touching Ashen's fur. "I'm glad they came," she said. "The monsters. They're amazing." "They saved us," Mara nodded. "Yes, Lyra, but they didn't just save us. They taught us how to be better, how to live with respect, courage, and intelligence. That's the lesson we must never forget." The night settled over the forest. Wolves lay resting, owls perched silently, and lizards glittered in the moonlight. Humans slept peacefully, protected by the guardians of Earth. For the first time in centuries, the world felt whole, balanced, and alive. Mara looked up at the stars one last time before closing her eyes. She understood now that humanity's place was not above Earth or beyond the stars. It was within the world, connected to all life, guided by courage and wisdom. The monsters of Earth had shown them the way, and humans had risen to meet the challenge. It was a new dawn. A dawn not of conquest or fear, but of hope, cooperation, and understanding. Humanity had survived the greatest threats, learned the hardest lessons, and found allies in the most unexpected places. The story of survival, unity, and courage would be told for generations. A tale of a species that cried to the stars for help, only to discover that the true saviors were the ancient guardians of their own world. Mara smiled, feeling peace and pride. Earth was alive, and humanity had finally learned to live in harmony with it. The monsters had responded, the alliance had been forged, and a new chapter had begun. The forest whispered in the night, the creatures settled into their watchful patterns, and humans dreamed of a brighter tomorrow, Humanity had survived, and together with the monsters,